Hi, everybody, and welcome to Hashtag Nailed It with me, Tova Lee.
I mean, Michael Lee.
Hi, how
Hello,
are
everybody.
you?
Good. How are you?
I'm really good. No, but this is for real.
Yeah.
First time we've sat down all day to say, how are you? So how are you?
Yeah, fine.
Mm-hmm.
Yes, this is another week of lockdown for everyone.
Another week of lockdown. And it has been a very, very, what's the word?
I don't know what word you're going to say.
A busy week, intense week, lots of things happening in the world.
Well, the world. Bloody hell.
I know,
Jesus Christ.
right?
Yes.
So where do you start?
Where do we start? No,
Where
I know.
do we start?
We're going straight in here, aren't we?
Well, I was trying to do small talk, but you kind of you just looked so concerned. And
no,
worried.
because I said you went, it's been tough. I thought you meant personally, but
oh, personally. Well, I've had a lot of garlic, so it's been one of those.
It's been utterly disgusting.
And Saturday we did Confessions of a Lockdown, which went down like a storm. Anybody who didn't show up, you missed out.
Yeah,
but it was a really good show. It was fun. I managed to not drink for a whole week, and then had to drink on Saturday night, which was really nice. And that's it. Okay, enough with the chit chat. Let's get on with it.
Well, I mean, obviously, we normally our podcast, we like to be light-hearted, giving people something to laugh about, because obviously days at the moment are quite tough.
Although, to be honest, we have been also known to have some serious topics from time to time.
Yeah. But I mean, today I think we'd be amiss if we didn't talk about what's going on, not just in America, but also in around the world now. Mm-hmm. Something very, very real, which is obviously racism. Obviously, unless you live on the moon, we all know what has restarted this conversation, really. A tragic occurrence that has rightly got people out onto the street. Just to remind you, May 25th, George Floyd, a 46-year-old black man, was suspected of passing a counterfeit $20 bill. This is why it's like...
I know, ridiculous.
And he ended up dying in Minneapolis. Derek Chauvin, a white police officer, pressed his knee to Floyd's neck for almost 9 minutes while he was handcuffed face down the street. And because it was filmed, everyone around the world effectively saw a man draw his first breath and talk himself and lose his life, while a man again pressed a knee onto her neck, and three other
for 9 minutes.
Three other police officers stood and watched it happening.
Yeah.
And rightly so, there's been an outpouring of anger, not just in America, where this thing happened, but in other countries, in solidarity, not only to George Floyd, but in solidarity to black people who've been persecuted all around the world. And it started, let's hope it goes somewhere good this time, it started the huge conversation about racism in society. Mm-hmm. And I know those of you, wherever you're listening in various countries around the world, but I think I'm sure to say, no matter where you live around the world, this is a topic that has to be addressed and tackled properly.
Yeah. I think this week has highlighted so many things, because obviously, social media has played a massive factor in all of this. Obviously, because it was filmed and the video was put online and it was seen over and over.
Yeah.
And then again, like you said, there was, support from everybody really, and on social media especially. And you see so many people talking about something that I guess, should be talked about all the time, and does actually get talked about every so often when something this horrible happens. And again, I don't live in the States, but that's not an excuse, I guess, because like you said, it happens everywhere. But it's not the first time that something like this has happened. There are many, many cases. I mean, we were talking about police brutality, something that everybody knows the term police brutality. But I have to be honest with you, I watched videos this week. People were sending me videos, and there's a lot of it out there now, really, really just out there. That shocked me to the core.
In most countries.
Yeah.
I can only talk.
Yeah, but it is shocking to watch, right? It's shocked me to the core. And I think what shocked me more than anything is how, because I have a real issue with violence, obviously, but not just how violent they are, but you see people who are not resisting arrests getting brutally kicked around, their heads are smashed in. You see women, like, for example, how they're handled by police officers that are like 3 times their sizes. You really do see excess amount of, unnecessary violence, which I honestly did not expect and did not realize. Sorry, you were going to...
No, I was just thinking, a few things. Obviously, this murder was filmed, which has obviously shone a light more. There's countless murders of black people, men and women, that aren't films. Obviously now with social media and everyone having a camera on them, reporting is up, and things you hope will be tackled and people will be rightly prosecuted. However, many people who follow this topic, probably more in America, certainly actually in the UK as well, there has been many instances of similar murders happening, whether in police custody or out on the streets, where certain police forces have looked after their own and officers have been let off. And this has happened in most countries. There is a thing about, I understand why you try and protect your own, as it were, but this has been going on for years, this kind of protection. This is the first. I mean, there was, again, with the instance we're talking about, initially the 3, when I first saw the incident, as well as just being in shock, I then immediately thought, why aren't these officers, they're
standing
still
there.
a human being, go get off, whatever. And in fairness to the mayor there and ever, they have now been charged with a slightly
But it took a while, didn't it?
It took a while.
There was a lot of pressure, I think, until that happened. And like I said, there are many stories coming out now, which, again, they were at some point, I guess, in the headlines, but just didn't make as much noise as this incident did because they weren't filmed, like you said. Okay, but I think what's interesting, what I would love to do here, because I don't think anybody really wants to hear 2 white people talk about racism, right?
No, absolutely.
I think, again, being somebody that works on social media, I see the debates that are taking place on social media, and I do feel that a lot of people are having debates that maybe it would be interesting just to highlight them. So different terms that have been thrown around, and I see people arguing about, and I think it does, it's a very tricky thing, but I think people will benefit just from a little explanation about the different things. So the first thing that happened after this whole thing came out and online was this massive argument between people about the slogan Black Lives Matter. That was, which by the way is a movement, right? And it kind of it's a movement actually that existed, that started a few years ago, but it got kind of now it's now in the front, and people got very upset. There were a lot of people online that don't understand Black Lives Matter. For them, they hear it as only Black Lives Matter. And then there was a lot of these people, kind of going, all lives matter, so that was the first wave of sort of people criticizing
and that immediately trivializes it. I'm sorry. By doing that, you're immediately trivializing the key thing, which is supporting black people who have been used to historically this kind of thing happening.
Yeah, but I think
all lives matter.
Yeah, but I think instead of shutting them up, which is what I have a problem, this debate can literally go in so many directions. I'm trying to stay on message, right? Because I think that when people say something that's ignorant or idiotic or even racist or wrong, right, online, there's a tendency to just shut them up. And actually that doesn't help, because those people are not, you haven't changed their mind. You haven't educated them. They're going to go on thinking what they think. So actually, I'm going to address what they're saying and explain that when somebody says Black Lives Matter, they don't mean Black lives are the only thing that matter. Somebody posted and said, if you, it's there's a silent 2 at the end, and then I saw so many amazing videos where we're not even, it's matter, it's the minimum. How could you argue that somebody's life matters? Do you know what I mean? And just doesn't or does, exactly, to have that argument, and just to take it away from race, because I guess it's sensitive for people. I equivalent it, like it's the equivalent of when I talk about women's rights, right? I get a lot of people, the naysayers, the people who have criticism, right? They'll come to me and they say, why are you complaining? Like, you're a white woman living in a Western country. You vote, you can have a job. Your husband's lovely and he takes care of the kids. Like, what's your problem? But the thing is, there are many women who don't have the privileges that I have. And those are like, do you get what I'm saying? So as far as I'm concerned, like, I see beyond myself. So I say the same.
You're not talking about yourself.
Yeah, exactly. I talk about women. So it's the same. It's human rights at the end of the day. And you cannot argue the fact that Black people have suffered, throughout history because of the color of their skin. So to say that their lives matter does not take away from, your life mattering. Of course it does. But we got to reach like some sort of even playing field. Like I say about women, as long as there are women who are not allowed to leave their houses, who are not allowed to drive, according to law in certain countries, I will never stop talking about women's rights because we don't have an even playing field. And don't even get me talking about women and men because we're still not there either. But my point is, it's an even playing field and we're not there when it comes to race. So that's my answer to the whole argument about Black Lives Matter or All Lives Matter. And that really was a very heated online debate in the first few days. It's died down
But
now.
this is my problem. I mean, I look at probably Twitter more than any other social media.
Yeah.
It's quick and all that. I kind of stopped looking in the last few days.
It's too much.
It's too much.
But what's too much, by the way, is not the conversation about racism. It's the, am I right? It's the, how do you say, one's fighting the other. I found that too, but we'll get to that in a minute, okay? About like people picking at each other. The other thing I saw was in America, where all of this started, obviously people went out to the street and they protested. Like any protest, by the way, it's peaceful, not. There are always going to be events that are less peaceful, right? It's a fact. Yeah. Because you've got a lot of people and some people have other agendas from there also has been many cases in the past week where actually the trouble was provoked by the police. This was caught on camera. This is not a conspiracy theory. Yeah. Yes, we were sitting and watching it live. And it doesn't matter if we watched it on CNN, which are pro-Trump. Nobody gives a fuck. They did not make this up. You saw it. So there were cases that police provoked the violence. And also there were cases that actually it was white people that started the violence. Some of it potentially, people who are actually maybe racists far rights who actually wanted it to look like Black people were doing it. And you know what? Sometimes it was even the Black community that did it. You know why? Because they're angry. And they have every right to be angry. And this brings me, because people don't understand. I've had people messaging me saying, Tova, I respect it. It's true. They should protest, but, they're ruining property. They're ruining this. Why does it have to be violent and all that? So apart from everything I said, I actually want to address like the anger because, it's ridiculous to me that people can't understand the level of anger because if you've been put down, right? And you have not had the same rights and the same way even to just be treated as a human being forever, would you not be angry? And this brings me to the experiment. What's her name? Jane.
This is
what's her name? Jane. Oh God, I forgot her last name now.
This one here.
Yes. There was an experiment that was done by, I think she's a teacher actually, and it's quite famous. Jane Elliott.
1968.
She's a white woman, and I watched her video earlier this week. She was actually on Oprah a few years ago, and she talks about this experiment called Blue Eyes, Brown Eyes, or Brown Eyes, Blue Eyes. That really, she talks about actually racism in a very matter-of-fact way. I would recommend you guys look it up and see everything that she does. But this specific experiment was basically taking people, like white people, okay, and within 15 minutes, showing them how angry, how anger happens when you're treated, the way the Black community is treated.
Let me go into a bit of detail.
Yeah, get into detail.
This is back in 1968, so this happened after the murder of Martin Luther King.
Yeah.
By James Earl Ray, a far-right activist who obviously murdered him when he got shot. And basically what she did to kind of show, I assume she did it to show white people how these things can happen in a way, she basically split some children based on the colour of their eyes.
Yeah.
So they were told that blue-eyed people were better, this is the kids, and smarter, and then brown-eyed people and the blue-eyed children were given extra privileges, and the brown-eyed people were given various restrictions. So, for example, blue-eyed children were given 5 more minutes of playtime when the brown-eyed children had to stay in. The brown-eyed children were forbidden from drinking from a drinking fountain and had to use paper cups. Blue-eyed children in this study were allowed to get their lunches first, and blue-eyed children were allowed to go back for seconds before the brown-eyed children. The brown-eyed children weren't allowed to play with the blue-eyed children. The reason given, they're not as good as blue-eyed people. The brown-eyed children were made to wear collars so they could be easily identified from a distance. So basically really echoing what was going on between blacks and whites in America. I think more so than even now, is how whatever it was. And then what she did then, the exercise was then reversed the next day, and the brown-eyed children then became the favoured ones, enjoying all the special privileges, while the blue-eyed children didn't. She is quoted as saying, "I watched what had been marvellous, cooperative, wonderful, thoughtful children turn into nasty, vicious, discriminating little third graders in the space of 15 minutes. I think that I learned more from the superior children than I did from the children that weren't considered inferior, because their personalities changed even more than the others did. Whether this is what they would like to be inside, but society inhabits them, I don't know. But for one day, we removed their inhibitions and they were ghastly. We didn't like each other very well by the end of the day, of that day on the first time. It even impacted their ability to complete tasks. The inferior children took almost twice as long to complete a task as they did when they put in a superior category." I mean, it's extraordinary.
Yeah.
Think about it. Something that simple.
Yeah, and
kids.
I watched her video, her interview in Oprah, and like she talks about this experiment. She goes, "If you can imagine, is that the door? I keep hearing like a bell. I'm sorry.
I don't know."
About how like people went from nice whatever people to really being angry and frustrated with only after being treated like in a way that they were treated for 15 minutes. Can you imagine what you feel like after centuries of being treated badly? So my point is, to those people who don't understand the anger, I really do suggest you go and watch the experiment, because I think it does teach you a lot. And also bear in mind that a lot of the vandalism and a lot of the violence that's happening is not actually happening by the Black community. And that, by the way, has also died down now, because it does seem that that things have sort of calmed down. There's more kind of peaceful protests.
I mean, I'd like to say that the majority of protests were peaceful.
Oh, yeah, for sure.
I mean, you look at certain, again, going back to 67, the race riots after Martin Luther was killed, Detroit, all these things going on. The LA riots, obviously, in 92, when Rodney King was murdered by a policeman. Those policemen were acquitted. This is the thing, going back to the anger of not just the Black community, I think any normal person should have anger with this.
Yeah.
The anger stems from this feeling that nothing's been done about it.
Yeah, so that brings that, yeah, but also that brings
changing.
Me as well, to, I'm sorry, but President Trump, which has become like a person that I talk about a lot these days. But really going back to that protest, in Washington, and how
this is when
he wanted to go and get the picture, and the way the police just bashed people that were just literally just standing there and not for 1 minute being violent or anything.
They weren't told to disperse with a megaphone.
I think it says it all. Like, for me, one of the main problems when it comes to racism, and that's another term, by the way, that's been thrown around a lot this week, and potentially you may have come across it in on social media and not known what it meant. And I didn't know what it meant till I went and read about it. What is systematic racism? And I feel like that links into that. We'll explain in a minute what that means. But for me, when you look at a government, when you look at a leader of a country that has such a big rift, is rift a word, right? And rift, and people kind of, sort of like divided or whatever, you would expect such leader, right, to do everything in their power to unite and bring people together. But the way I see what Trump does is like the complete opposite. And that day was a
He
great
focused on the
example.
He went straight in.
Yeah.
No one condones
But what he
looting,
wants
no
to
one
do, but
condones
he what
attacking property.
yeah,
I
but what
get
he
that.
was trying
But
to, but what he's trying to do, right? And I'm sorry for American listeners who are Trump supporters, and people hate it when I talk about Trump. It's not about politics. I'm not American. I don't vote in America. Like, it's not my thing. So I'm talking as an outsider. I'm just talking at a human level, okay? This guy's trying to make two camps in his country and have you guys fight with each other. And whether it's black against whites, whether it's women against men, whether it's whatever, that's what he does. And that's what he did that day.
It's a ploy that people in power
Yeah.
have always done.
To control the masses. Divide and conquer. For sure.
How do you get one side agreeing with you? You divide and you
Yes.
make division amongst the normal people in the street. How can you make
And
them change?
really, in a
and
case,
it doesn't have to be black and white. It's rich and
Yeah.
poor, working class, middle class. So many ways of doing it.
And when it comes to human rights, because at the end of the day, Black rights are human rights, right? There shouldn't be any division, but the way they create the division is when they divert the conversation. So instead of keeping the conversation on topic, which is racism, right? The conversation is diverted to looters, to vandalism of property. Do you get what I'm saying? And then you're talking about that, and you're not actually talking about the fact that there are people who are getting killed by policemen, etc.
But let's move on from the
Yeah.
Trump thing. It's
Yeah.
when you say systematic racism,
So let's talk about
it's
that.
the whole of society.
Yes.
The obvious place that feeds it, drip feed,
Yeah.
is the media. The media.
That's not an
deliberately-
obvious thing, though.
Isn't it?
No,
It's to
I
me.
don't think so.
To-
No, I think it's obvious only when you talk about it and you break it down and you show examples.
Well,
But
I'm
I
gonna-
think
I'm gonna show
I
you
will
something.
wait. But I think most of the time, actually, it goes above our heads because we're so used to getting those messages. Wait, I'm going to take it away again from racism just because I feel like there are other topics that people find easier to hear. Okay, but we talked about rape culture in the past, right? Rape culture is something that exists always in everything, in the media and advertising, in movies. But the thing is, we're so used to it. We're so used to it, to seeing the dad with his 16 daughter coming downstairs, right? She's going on a date and he's like, "You're not wearing that." That's rape culture. But we see it in every single fucking sitcom. You've seen it in every movie, So my point is, we're so used to it, we don't even see it. So taking it now back to racism, lots of examples.
Yeah, I mean, my point was with the media. It's kind of the same argument. If it's drip fed, you don't realise.
Yeah.
You'll read an article. I mean, this is it. I mean, let's take two here. Does it say what paper this is? Anyway, this is two cases that show racial profiling and opposing attitude of the media towards criminals and victims of different races. So this guy is maybe you can put this up afterwards. It's a picture of a clean-cut white kid, nice hair, shirt, tie. James Egan Holmes is an American mass murderer who at the age of 24 shot dozens of people at a Denver movie theatre. He killed 12 people, injured 70. But in most news articles, he was described as a top student, a quiet intellectual, and a brilliant science student. We actually read one article which reported on his background, academic achievements, and what a promising young man he was, and the shooting was just an incident, almost like a side note. And the report didn't even focus on the fact he murdered 12 people and injured 70. And then you get an unarmed black teenager, a guy called Michael Brown, who was shot dead by policemen for suspected theft. He was shot 6 times. His body was left on the street for over 4 hours as the community watched on. News reports depicted him as no angel, a thug, and focus on the fact that a teenage boy had lost his life for stealing cigarettes. It's just very, very different picture of him in a old vest, dirty vest. It's just little things like that.
Yeah.
The reporting of it is completely different. So you immediately form a picture of white boy oh, something's flipped in his head and he's gone crazy, you know, because he was a good student. It was extraordinary.
It's just
all
like
the
the
time.
example that I gave you earlier. Again, like just again another example from a different type of thing, the manipulation that the media does is when it comes to moms, because I know there's a lot of moms out there. I remember when I was preparing to go to Nepal, right, and people were sending me like all these articles. There was this article of this female mountain climber who had died while climbing, a mountain somewhere. But the headlines didn't read "mountain climber dies." They read "mother dies while climbing a mountain," because there was a criticism about the fact that as a mother, she shouldn't have been doing it, and that goes into sexism and all the stereotypes about women and mom. So my point is, the media, it doesn't always present all the truth. It gives you a version, and it's very scary to see how systematic racism is incorporated in everything. So it's way beyond the obvious, which has been pointed out many times this week on social media, which is, schooling, budgets, right? All these things and, there was this great video that was shared over and over this week about like runners, and to show systematic racism is like the white runners get to start 200 meters ahead of the black runners. Do you get what I'm saying? So it's like, you've all got the same chance. Look, you're all doing the same run, but these people have like a 200 meter four. So it goes beyond that, like way, way, way beyond that.
So, I mean, I think we can talk about this for a long, long time. Yeah. I think it's important to sort of go, what could people try and do?
Wait, but before we say that, I actually want to go back to what you said earlier. One of the main things that I have seen online this week, though, are people lashing out at each other. And what I have found it to be is mainly white people lashing out at each other for either, not doing enough, or what they're doing, they're not doing well enough. And people are calling each other out and all that type of thing. And for me, I feel like there's a place and there's a real value in calling people out if they're racist, or if they're anti-Semitic, or if they are what else? I don't know. Homophobic, or if they are Islamophobic or whatever. There's a real value in that, and we should definitely call people up on that 100%. But again, I feel like a lot of people in the mainly white community are slightly overcompensating, potentially because we're all feeling the same, which is white guilt, I guess. And I just want to say, I think it's important to keep the topic on track, to keep the conversation on track, and not get distracted by all that noise, because at the end of the day, it is noise, and people need to listen. But we have put together some thoughts and ideas of what we could do, because everybody knows to say, oh, it all starts with education, but that needs to actually be backed up with stuff and not just be vacant. Do you want to have a look at this and say?
Well, of course, the only way things will change for future generations is obviously through education and educating our children. I think Nelson Mandela famously wrote, "No one is born hating another person because of the colour of his skin or his background or his religion. People must learn to hate, and if they can learn to hate, they can be taught to love. For love comes more naturally to the human heart than its opposite." You've got to kind of face your own racism. Not every Indian person loves curry. Not all Muslims are terrorists. Not all Asian people into martial arts. Black people don't all come from poor backgrounds and are less educated than you. We've got a responsibility to stop attributing traits to people based on the colour of their skin. It's ludicrous attributing one's IQ level based on the colour of the eyes that we mentioned
and again
earlier.
I just have to add, I do believe that I agree, racism isn't something you're born with. Hate for anybody isn't something you're born, it's something you learn. And like we said earlier, again going back to Trump, etc., is that it's learned because it there are people who benefit from it. And Jane again talks about the whole sharing the power. People who have the power don't want to share it, and there is a hierarchy in this world. There really is, with white, straight Christian men being at the absolute top. There are people who don't want to share that power with those who are beneath them, whether it's black people, whether it's gay people, whether it's women of color, etc., etc., etc.
But my point is, if you're white, then read up about white privilege and allow yourself to accept the uncomfortable reality that you enjoy certain privilege. Don't, oh, I'm not, I didn't do well in education, I'm white. We've all got, if you're white, you have white privilege, full stop, you know, but look into it, you know, I'm sort of saying, you know, stop allowing race to be such a taboo subject. It's something we've got to talk about.
It's actually something we didn't mention, and you're right about the white privilege, because again, that was something that was talked a lot about this week, and I think it does get people a little bit defensive because the way they see it and they realize, they think about it.
White privilege means you're rich. You don't have to.
Yeah, exactly. Or that,
you've already got an
or
advantage.
that you've been handed things
Yes.
in life. Like
Yeah.
your life's been super easy.
Yeah.
You just got everything handed to you, and it sort of takes away from the efforts that and struggles that you've potentially had in your life. So it makes people defensive. But that's not the meaning of white privilege.
Exactly.
It doesn't mean that. You could 100% be somebody who's worked very hard to achieve any amazing achievement that you've done in your life. It could still mean that you have not had an easy life and have had your own struggles. White privilege simply means that you have more opportunities than people who are not white simply because of the color of your skin. And I also want to say that I believe that it's a problem as humans for us to really understand the suffering of another person that's not the same as us. So how many conversations have we had when I've tried to talk to you about what it's like to be a woman? And I was saying to you, you don't understand the feeling of leaving the house and have it in the back of your mind that there's certain things that you need to be doing to be careful. Like, you don't think that way, right? So how could the people who are listening now who are like questioning it, how could we possibly really understand what it means like to be a black person? Like, how? You couldn't, you know? So it's about listening, and it's about opening our eyes, and it's about not arguing when people say, this is how I feel, this is my life, this is my reality. Right?
Yeah, but you're right, because people become defensive.
Yeah.
As soon as you become defensive, well, that's not me, I've never done that. They're not saying it's you specifically. When a person says you might be talking in general general society, all of us, as opposed to you individually. I think that's what happens in social media. People get really defensive that people start thinking, well, that's not me personally, therefore it's not my problem and all that. It's all our problem. You know, this is just, you know, again, we're living in an incredibly hateful world at the moment. And bizarrely, at a time with this awful pandemic going on, you kind of think, what a time for people to get together. We've now got a shared...
This is the other thing.
We've got this shared thing that we're all going through.
This is the main
concern.
What
a time to bring together, because we're all going through.
But this is the biggest thing.
And now this has obviously happened again,
and the main
and it's
concern,
moving away from this other story.
Totally. And you started the beginning of this podcast by saying that exact thing is that there's a lot of especially with social media, right? It's like how do you say, a flash in the pants? No, what? Pants, not the pants.
Not pants.
Flash in the pan, and then people move on to the next thing. And you're right, because when COVID started, there was this feeling that maybe the world was going to change, and not in the way that we are going to have to wear masks forever, or potentially have social distancing forever. Not that way. And us maybe realizing, that we're all in it together, that our mortality, that actually we don't need to travel 7 times a year or consume so much shit, more meaningful changes in the world. But I think that's gone out the window, and you kind of realize that that's not going to happen. Everybody's gone back to being horrible to each other. And now everybody's so into talking about Black Lives Matter. And I'm thinking, but what are you going to be doing tomorrow? What are you actually doing at home? Are you talking to your kids? And also, when something else happens in the world that's wrong against another minority group, or just against any individual or anybody, are you still going to be as passionate about that? Because I think you should.
Absolutely.
I don't think you should only be passionate about things of race. I think you should just be passionate about humans in general, and maybe then the world will become a better place. Who knows? What do you think? Yes?
No, I concur.
Anyway, we're going to post links this time for materials that we have found useful, whether it's for how to talk to kids about racism, and also obviously the video with Jane and the experiment, which I personally found really, really useful, and different things. We'd love to hear your thoughts. Write in. Let us know if this was remotely helpful or interesting. And that's it. And thank you so much for listening to us.
Love you. See you next week.
Bye, you guys.